It took me a lot of movies, 5, 6, maybe 7 movies before I really understood it.
Sidney Lumet never made a movie outside New York City, and he never wanted to. For 50 years, he turned the streets of Manhattan and Brooklyn into his personal film studio.
A man takes off on a racial attack, juror number 8 or whatever. I loved it. They never had names, only numbers.
Courtrooms, police stations, television newsrooms became his stages. Every corner of the city held a story about power, corruption, and human behavior under pressure. But before Lumet became the master of gritty urban drama, he was a student of cinema watching films that would shape his entire approach to storytelling. Lumet didn't just watch movies for entertainment or escapism. He studied them like a scientist examining human behavior through a microscope, looking for truth in every frame and gesture.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore! I want you to get up right now.
These weren't casual weekend viewings or film school assignments that he forgot about later. They were revelations that changed how he saw people, society, and the responsibility of filmmakers to tell uncomfortable truths. Some taught him about ensemble acting and group dynamics. Others showed him how to find poetry in everyday struggles and working-class life. Lumet once said that movies are about behavior, not plot twists or special effects.
Gordon Willis's work, the cameraman's work, is phenomenal. They are as close to perfect movies as I think exist.
The films that shaped him proved this philosophy over and over again. Here are the 6 movies that didn't just influence Sidney Lumet's directing style, they created his understanding of what cinema could accomplish when it focused on real human emotions and social problems. 6. The Rules of the Game. Jean Renoir's The Rules of the Game became Sidney Lumet's masterclass in ensemble filmmaking and social observation.
D'ailleurs que ton mari est de mon avis.
Il a pris son fusil de telle façon à démarrer son chargeur.
During his early years as a director.
I always think it's healthiest when there's every kind of movie around. I mean, it'd be very boring if it were only my kind of movie. And
This French comedy drama about wealthy aristocrats and their servants during a weekend hunting party showed Lumet how to reveal an entire society's corruption through intimate character interactions. Renoir peeled back the polite surface of upper-class life to expose the moral rot underneath their fancy manners. Lumet was fascinated by how Renoir managed such a large cast without losing focus on individual characters or their personal stories. Every person in the film, from the rich landowner to the kitchen staff, had their own motivations and secrets that drove the plot forward. This approach would later influence Lumet's own ensemble films like 12 Angry Men, where 12 different personalities clash in one small room. The film taught Lumet that the most powerful social criticism comes through character behavior, not political speeches or obvious symbolism that hits audiences over the head. Renoir never preached about class inequality or social justice. He simply showed how the rich and poor treated each other when they thought nobody was watching them. The aristocrats were petty, selfish, and cruel while pretending to be civilized and cultured people. What impressed Lumet most was Renoir's ability to find humor in serious social problems without making light of real suffering or inequality. The film was both entertaining and deeply critical of French society before World War II. For Lumet, this became the perfect template for making socially conscious movies. 5. Open City, Roberto Rossellini's. Open City hit Sidney Lumet like a revelation about what movies could accomplish when they captured real life.
Between where the light crisscrosses and whatever the recording surface is, whether it's film or an image orthicon tube or what have you.
Instead of Hollywood fantasy and artificial studio productions.
Heureusement, nos collines nous suffisent, et surtout ceux de notre ami Roselin.
This Italian film about resistance fighters during Nazi occupation was shot in the actual streets of Rome with real people who had lived through the war firsthand. Lumet saw how Rossellini turned the entire city into a film set, using bomb buildings and desperate citizens to tell a story that felt completely authentic and emotionally honest. The film taught Lumet that location shooting could be more powerful than any expensive studio set built in Hollywood with unlimited budgets and resources. Rossellini didn't have money for fancy equipment or famous actors, so he used handheld cameras and natural lighting to create scenes that felt like documentary footage. This approach would later influence Lumet's own gritty New York films like Serpico and Dog Day Afternoon, where the city became another character in the story. What amazed Lumet most was how Crisis revealed people's true character under extreme pressure and life-threatening situations that stripped away all pretense. The film showed ordinary citizens becoming heroes when their lives and freedom were threatened by fascist occupation forces. Teachers, priests, and housewives risked everything to fight back against Nazi soldiers, proving that courage comes from unexpected places during desperate times. Rossellini proved that movies didn't need big budgets or movie stars to move audiences and change their understanding of history and human nature. Real locations, real emotions, and real stakes created more drama than any Hollywood spectacle could manufacture in a studio. For Lumet, Open City became proof that authentic filmmaking could be more powerful than artificial entertainment designed just to make money. 4. Grand Illusion. Jean Renoir's Grand Illusion became Sidney Lumet's guide for making anti-war films that focused on human dignity instead of battlefield explosions and military heroics. This French masterpiece about World War I prisoners of war showed Lumet that the most powerful war movies aren't about fighting,
that character. But basically, I think most courtroom dramas, the characters have to fit into the plot.
they're about how conflict reveals the artificial barriers that divide people from different backgrounds and social classes. The film follows French soldiers captured by German officers during the First World War, but Renoir refused to make simple good guys versus bad guys propaganda. Instead, he showed how aristocratic French and German officers had more in common with each other than with working-class soldiers from their own countries. Class and social background mattered more than national loyalty or patriotic duty to country. What impressed Lumet most was how Renoir found humanity in every character, even enemy soldiers who could have been portrayed as evil villains. The German prison camp commander treats his French prisoners with respect and dignity because they share the same upper-class background and cultural values. Meanwhile, working-class soldiers from both sides understand each other's struggles, regardless of which uniform they wear. This approach would later influence Lumet's own films about institutional conflict, like Fail-Safe and The Verdict, where he showed how systems corrupt good people rather than creating simple heroes and villains. Renoir taught Lumet that the real enemy isn't other nations or different peoples. It's the artificial divisions that powerful institutions create to keep ordinary people fighting each other instead of questioning authority. Grand Illusion proved that movies could be both entertaining and deeply philosophical about war, class, and human nature without being preachy or heavy-handed. 3. Citizen Kane. Orson Welles' Citizen Kane became Sidney Lumet's masterclass.
Charles, I think I should remind you of a fact that you seem to have forgotten.
Yes.
That you are yourself one of the largest individual stockholders.
In using camera techniques to reveal character psychology and inner emotional truth.
That is really unique. I don't remember a courtroom movie in which a character was able to plumb the depths of his own soul.
This American classic about a newspaper tycoon's rise and fall showed Lumet how innovative cinematography could make audiences feel what characters were experiencing without relying on obvious dialogue or heavy-handed exposition to explain everything. Welles used deep focus photography to show multiple characters at different distances in the same shot, creating visual tension and power dynamics that words alone couldn't capture effectively. Lumet studied how Welles positioned powerful characters in the foreground while victims appeared small and distant in the background. This technique would later influence Lumet's own films like 12 Angry Men, where camera angles revealed which jurors held real influence over the group. What fascinated Lumet most was how Welles showed the corruption of power through Charles Foster Kane's gradual isolation from other human beings throughout his life. As Kane becomes richer and more powerful, the camera literally moves farther away from him, making him appear smaller and more alone in massive, empty rooms filled with expensive possessions, but no genuine relationships or love. The film taught Lumet that technical innovation only matters when it serves the story and helps audiences understand characters better than conventional filmmaking methods could achieve. Welles didn't use fancy camera work to show off his skills as a director. He used it to explore how wealth and power destroy human connections and personal happiness. For Lumet, Citizen Kane proved that American filmmakers could be just as artistic and sophisticated as European directors while still telling stories that entertain mainstream audiences and achieve commercial success in Hollywood. 2. The Bicycle Thieves. Vittorio De Sica's The Bicycle Thieves became Sidney Lumet's blueprint for finding profound drama in ordinary working-class struggles and everyday survival stories.
I'm not analyzing it. I have no theme. I have no idea of the kind of picture I want to do.
This Italian neo-realist masterpiece about a poor man searching Rome for his stolen bicycle showed Lumet that the most powerful films come from simple human situations that reveal universal truths about dignity, family, and moral compromise under economic pressure. The film's father-son relationship deeply moved Lumet and influenced his understanding of how desperation can damage the people we love most in life. As the father becomes more frantic in his search, his young son slowly loses respect for his hero and role model. Lumet saw this painful dynamic reflected in many American families struggling with poverty, unemployment, and the loss of hope for a better future. What impressed Lumet most was De Sica's use of real locations and non-professional actors to create authentic emotions that no Hollywood studio could manufacture artificially. The streets of post-war Rome became a character in the story, showing how economic hardship affects entire communities and neighborhoods. This approach would later influence Lumet's own street-level dramas like Dog Day Afternoon and Serpico. De Sica proved that movies about poor people could be just as dramatically compelling as stories about wealthy or powerful characters in expensive settings. The stolen bicycle becomes a symbol of working-class dignity and the daily struggle to maintain self-respect when society offers no support or understanding. For Lumet, The Bicycle Thieves showed that cinema's greatest power comes from treating ordinary people with the same respect and attention usually reserved for kings, presidents, and movie stars in traditional Hollywood entertainment. 1. The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. John Huston's The Treasure of the Sierra Madre became Sidney Lumet's ultimate guide for showing how extreme circumstances reveal people's true nature and moral character.
The end comes up. They're great movies. They are brilliantly directed, magnificently directed.
This American classic about three men searching for gold in Mexican mountains taught Lumet that the most compelling drama comes from watching ordinary people face impossible choices that test their values, friendships, and basic humanity under life-threatening pressure. The film follows how greed and paranoia slowly destroy the partnership between three prospectors who start as friends but end as enemies. Lumet was fascinated by Huston's careful character development, showing how each man responds differently to wealth, danger, and moral temptation. This psychological approach would later influence Lumet's own films about corruption and institutional pressure, like Serpico and Prince of the City. What impressed Lumet most was how Huston used the harsh desert environment to strip away social pretenses and civilized behavior from his characters. Away from society's rules and expectations, the men revealed their true personalities through actions rather than speeches or obvious dialogue about their motivations and inner thoughts. Huston proved that character-driven drama could be just as exciting as action adventures filled with special effects and elaborate stunts. The real suspense came from wondering which character would break first under pressure and how far good people would go when faced with impossible survival situations. For Lumet, The Treasure of the Sierra Madre showed that cinema's greatest power lies in examining human behavior when all comfortable illusions are stripped away. Great films don't just entertain audiences, they force viewers to ask uncomfortable questions about their own moral limits and personal integrity. Sidney Lumet never talked about favorite movies. He talked about teachers, films that showed him how to find truth in human behavior, dignity in struggle, and poetry in New York streets. These 6 movies didn't just influence his work, they created his vision. Cinema as mirror, microscope, and conscience all at once.